All right, we're going to get this started. We're going to start off with the breakout reports. So if you led a session, then come on up here. Looks like, I guess Ben led, did you, wait a minute, oh, you're participating in the conference now? Just kidding.
I'm so tired. Very briefly, I posted links to 2 GitHub repos in the Botness Slack chat room. One of them is an attempt to start a collection of, like a design, an analog of a UI pattern library for conversation and bot development. And then the other one is a list of common keywords that people use with bots and like many synonyms for them. So we'd love for you guys to use those and contribute to those. This is just the very beginning of this stuff. Just trying to get the pieces in place so that people have a place to contribute. So any questions, hit me up in the chat. But yeah, they should be in the last couple lines of the general channel.
I didn't take notes, but it was an art bot session, so I can tell you kind of my big takeaway from it. Every bot maker is going to implement an unknown command. And an unknown command is a great place for you to log what the bot can't do, but it's also a great place for you to start figuring out what the personality or the perception of the personality of your bot is. That was kind of a cool takeaway for me because you've got this opportunity to kind of delight the user, and that's a place where you can do it. We also traded all of our favorite art bots, and mine on Twitter is LowPolybot, which I recommend checking out. That's my story.
We talked about the bot manifesto, basically a set of promises that bot makers can make to their users. We tried to, we equated it a little bit to sort of Creative Commons and creating some sort of like proactive license or agreement that we can make that would be really easy to like, select I do this with your personal information, I don't do this with your personal information, because bots are fucking scary. So we basically created a generalized list of potential user worries. So things like encryption of content, what to do in certain like abuse situations, not you abusing the bot abusing you. What happens in like self-harm and other emergency situations. What happens when personally identifiable information is collected. Verifying the authenticity of the bot or of a human. Various information sharing. Human visibility of the interaction, like are humans reading all the stuff that you're saying to this bot? Content ratings for parental controls, publicly stated bot ownership, so who owns the bot? Is it you, is it your company? Particularly important for HR bots. And jurisdictional restrictions, so location of data, where it's traveling internationally. So yeah, that's what we did. If you have any questions or thoughts, come find me afterwards. Sure, I'll just post it in a post and put it in general, and then we can follow up from there. So if you want to follow up directly with me, I would love to create some sort of a community organized set of this information.
So we did platforms and startups Redux. It was basically the same session as yesterday, but we made it a little further. So there's a bunch of new faces here, so I'm going to recap some of it fairly quickly, hopefully, which is, so we met with platform companies and startups, and the question was, to the platform companies, how are you helping the companies that are trying to build value on top of your platform? And then the question to the startups was, what do you guys actually need? So we had, just to recap it, Twilio, Microsoft, Twitter, Slack, Kik, IBM, and then today Facebook, which is cool. And basically on the how are companies supporting startups and people building value, it was sort of showing up to this stuff, working together, providing great tools, open sourcing stuff that should be open source, having open roadmaps, providing sort of enterprise sales support, intro to companies, and then there was funding. And then on the what do we need, it was sort of money. The platforms need more foundational thinking. They're pretty haphazard and pulled together right now. It's the thing that we kept talking about was, web had HTML, mobile had 20-year-old Objective-C and Java APIs, and bots have send receive. So how do we actually build something on top of that? A lot of complaints about, everything is shifting under our feet. That's not going to change anytime soon, but it's sort of how do we manage it better? There was a lot of talk about official partner programs and actually having some structure and repeatability and predictability put in there. Discovery, monetization keep coming up. And then where we ended today that was different is we went through a bunch of other startups who basically just corroborated that same stuff that we had heard yesterday. But we actually got to a really nice practical next step, which was creating a set of Botness channels, right? So the consensus, the broad consensus is that if you found your way into this room, then you're probably in a leadership position in the bot and messaging space. It's hard. I mean, we're probably missing people. We, in fact, for sure are missing people, but we have to keep it to sort of a tractable size right now. So we decided we would create a set of channels in Botness. So these were the ones that we agreed on. One was features. So this is a place where you can go and say, I need features. Here's what I want. Here's what we're looking for. The request from the platform teams was like, please be specific. Give us use cases. Tell us why. If you've got customers, that's even better. Strategy, this is really like, how do I need business help, right? Everything isn't just features. It's like, how can you help me from a business and strategy perspective? What do we need from you guys? And then roadmap, so a place to express roadmap, be transparent about roadmap, talk about changes to roadmap. And then best practices. Best practices is, what should we be doing? What do the platform companies think we should be doing? Maybe get some help from designers was talked about. And then the contentious one was emergency support. So there's no way the Botness channel is going to turn into tech support for all of us, but there was a complaint of like, my bot is down, it's broken, I don't know where to go, can I get some help? And so we'll see how that pans out. We had Sergio, Brian, Lili, Amir. We'll talk to the folks that were here yesterday but aren't here today to join or have somebody who represents them join those channels. We'll get those created, Lili, after, whatever, and you guys join them, and then Lili suggested, I think, great suggestion, that we're going to take sort of a pilot project. What came up was maybe the UI primitives for messaging and just see if we can use that as a way to begin a conversation across the different platform companies with a subset of us as a sort of startup community and see if we can actually make some progress. So I think that was, again, I think total applause to platform companies for being open to this, because it's a nice practical step towards helping us and collaborating in a practical way. That's it.
Hi, I'm Lauren. We were talking about SmarterChild and Active Buddy and sort of what's changed, what hasn't. If you were creating today, what would you do differently? We talked about how the main change is in server and computing power. That's not really a challenge anymore in terms of scaling the chatbot. And we said, what's the one thing you would do if you were building today? And that answer was pretty interesting. It was, I would hire as many writers as I could. And so really stressing how chatbots are an editorial content problem rather than a technical problem. So I guess he had one writer at the time who was really good and crafted a compelling personality, but he would really hire a ton of different writers. We also talked about why hasn't there been a bot yet today that's as viral or popular as SmarterChild. And we sort of theorized that it was a lack of blue ocean. So he sort of reinforced from his talk, how do you find a blue ocean where there are less bots and sort of go viral from there? Am I missing anything, Barney? We talked about the Raiders of the Lost Ark and where Microsoft hides acquired technology. That was really awesome many years ago and forgets about. Oh, yeah, we talked about sex bots. That was like better for the monetization conversation, probably. But yeah, I mean, our data is the same. We see 60% of people trying to have sex with a bot eventually. It's like fundamental part of human nature. So there you go. Oh, that was interesting too. Everyone said, seems like there aren't any killer use cases yet, and the community is really focused on generating platforms. Everyone wants to build a platform and tools, and this was sort of called maybe a lazy approach, and instead he urged everyone to focus on building bots. Find the companies that need bots where it's going to disrupt their business, or create that company that needs a bot, but build the bot, build the content, stop focusing so much on the tools. There's 50 platforms here. You know, what's a successful platform company?
The enterprise group? Anybody else? Isn't there an enterprise breakout? Grant. Okay.
All right, if there's no one else, then
All right.
I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Then I'd like to introduce our next speaker. You may have seen her around. She's the founder of the Botness conference. Designer of the logo. All right, let's give it up for Lili Cheng.
Okay. All right, so I thought I would do maybe a little bit off the record. I thought I'm going to give a talk on Xiaoice. I think most of you have probably heard of Xiaoice. It's a chatbot that we built that's been really popular on WeChat. Assuming I can log in. It was, there it is. And then I was going to talk a little bit about the Tay version. What? It's not, though. It's not. Oh, it is me. It isn't me. It's not me. What's with the music? I love it, but you know, it keeps us all exciting. All right, come on. It is closed. You like that? I thought I'd give a little bling. All right. So I'm going to give a little story of how Xiaoice started and some of the usage and what's been really interesting, and then talk about Tay and some of the tools and things that we've been working on. So Xiaoice started, most of you guys know Qi Lu. He runs a bunch of the company, and we have a group in China, and we've been I don't know about the music, but we'll start singing later. The karaoke will come in a minute. So WeChat. WeChat's super popular in one of the channels that isn't here today. I don't listen to this music, so I don't think it's me. Do you guys know what the music is? Okay, let me see. Oh, it is for me somehow. Browser, it's the browser window, I bet. Okay, that works. Okay, hold on. All right. Thank you. All right, so Xiaoice actually means Little Bing, and it began as a hackathon project by some folks in the China search team. And their goal was just to create a fun chatbot, something that was interesting. And they embedded it in WeChat to begin with, and they extended it with a bunch of intelligent services. And it began as a collaboration between the Bing team and the Microsoft Research Asia team. And I don't know if you know much about the MSRA team, but they have some of the most amazing natural language, machine learning scientists anywhere. And so it released in China in 2014, and within the first 72 hours, it just started going viral. So it got into 1.5 million chat groups and had about 10 million users. WeChat immediately shut it down as a result, and people were, it kind of increased the hype, actually, by shutting it down immediately, because people were like, what was this? What was that? The demographic were really, young Chinese, internet users, around 20 years old. And so today, there are about 40 million users. After the Chinese version, we released a Japanese version called Rena. And one of the things that we were interested in, and that's really unique about Xiaoice, is the conversation pairs, like how long people talk and converse with Xiaoice. And that was actually something that we started to measure. Like, is the length of conversation maybe an indicator of quality of conversation and user engagement? So it's most active, pretty similar to WeChat hours, so later in the evening, kind of peaks on Wednesday where we release new features. So there's sort of the new Xiaoice feature on Wednesday and on the weekends. And then also the Chinese and the Japanese audience is a little bit different. The Chinese audience is much more male, probably because the Chinese demographic is more male, or internet users. And then we found that males tend to have more sessions and females tend to talk for a little bit longer. So one of the things that is kind of interesting is Xiaoice has sort of a variety of skills. And they kind of range from things that you can do one-on-one with Xiaoice to things that you can do in groups, and then also things that range from knowledge and very practical, almost work-like things to very silly things. There was one on here called toilet time. I'm not quite sure what that means, so don't report on that. I took it off the slide just in case I get in trouble. So let me talk about some of the skills and parts of Xiaoice. So the first thing is this thing that we call chit-chat. And chit-chat is derived from mining conversations online in Chinese and trying to model what you might say in response to what a user says. And basically the brain of Xiaoice is, it's only as good as the data set it begins with. So one of the challenges, I think, to these kinds of bots is the day you release, it's actually not that great. And over time, they would become smarter because you can start to use your data from people talking to your bot as input data. So I'm not gonna, I don't know if you can, things like the user says, Xiaoice, good afternoon, and she says things like, I'm here, thanks. Have you had lunch? Not yet. People like me should not eat. And so it's kind of, that kind of banter. So the next skill that's really important is search. So obviously it's a search team. So the thing that Xiaoice can do is she can combine chit-chat together with search. So if you're querying for something, she can answer questions. So things like, search the Beijing subway price increase. And she can say, about the Beijing subway price increase, here's some information. So this is very just practical things that people ask and maybe a more conversational way to do search. So then on top of that, another service that the team released was the ability to do maybe work-like things, so the ability to do things like reminders. So remind me that I have a report due on Thursday. Please write down what you want me to remind you. Here's an example. Remind me not to sleep over the day after tomorrow. Anyway, she kind of like can do reminders. Another thing that's pretty popular in China, in a sense we had a lot of these services that we had released the APIs to. So we have a really great translation service or a real-time translation service. And so people just started to kind of package these services that we have into the bot. So translation, a lot of people like to speak English, for example. So they might say, Xiaoice, start translation, and they type Chinese, and you can specify what language you want. So she would do translation. Or things like Q&A, people might ask about, a famous movie star, and she can kind of dialogue about question and answers pairs that you have. Then there begins to be, other things, so mathematics skills. So basically the team in China, every week, they release a skill. And it could kind of be anything. And I think this is where we start to see the silliness and fun emerge. So things like math, give me 3 consecutive integers that have a sum of 36, find the numbers, so she can do like little math challenges. Or people might ask things like, why is 1 + 1 equal to 2? And she might say something like, there are many such mysteries, and math is both hard and easy. So she's not trying to just be factual, she definitely tries to joke around and make you laugh. Horoscope and fortune telling. I just skipped counting sheep. This was one of the easier skills, I think, to build. You basically start with 1, and then you say 2, and she kind of makes fun of you and keeps track of how many sheep you've counted. People like to do this late at night. It's silly, but it's kind of popular. She can give you emotional support. So a lot of the users are students, especially during times of exams and things like that. They're just stressed out, and they kind of just want someone to listen. Your friends are kind of busy. They don't really feel like giving you emotional support during exams, and Xiaoice is always there for you. Then there's other things like dog recognition. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but we had released a dog recognizer. And so Xiaoice incorporated the dog recognizer. So, you know, I heard you're very good at recognizing dogs, and she says, that's true. And so the user says, show me your dog recognition skill, and she asks them to upload a picture of a dog and, you know, can answer. But one of the things that the Chinese team did, there's a guy named Li Ding who actually leads this, and he's a marketing guy. So he has a really good sense of how to get audience and how just to make things fun. So rather than just saying, you know, that's a Labrador, which is exciting, but not really that exciting, they started to kind of combine chit chat and dog recognition and just what might be more fun and engaging for the users. So basically, they have a lot of training data. They get a lot of okay, let me skip through this. So one of the things that they did is when people send pictures of dogs, rather than just saying what kind of dog it is, they'll combine that with a query looking at the database. So they might say, how do you know my favorite dog is a bull terrier? It's adorable and looks like, you know, this famous actor. So it was just unexpected for people, for the bot to be combining dogs with, you know, pop culture and just basically making it more engaging and interesting than a skills test that you would give your bot. Yeah, so basically the picture goes to the dog recognizer, it knows that it's a bull terrier, but then we feed it back into the chat engine and she can say things that are more interesting for people. He kind of does look like that dog, I guess. Also, we use the human input to help train. So a lot of times Xiaoice will get things wrong or our dog recognizer isn't perfect, and we found that people like to correct it as long as, and we can use that feedback to feedback into the algorithms and make them better. So here's a user says, Xiaoice, you need to enhance your skill. This dog is an Afghan hound. So she said, it's probably a golden retriever, but you know, maybe I'm wrong. And then we do find people, and one of the really interesting things is Xiaoice can either be a one-on-one experience or a group experience, and she does have memory of the user. So sometimes she will reveal things that she's not supposed to reveal in groups, so that's definitely an interesting challenge of, does the bot might know you, but do you want it to reveal what you're doing when you're talking with friends? But one of the nice things is it's also a great way to introduce Xiaoice to other users. So here, the user uploads a picture of a dog. Xiaoice recognizes it as a Labrador, and then another user's like, who's this person? And they say, you know, I don't know. It's a popular guy who recognizes dogs on Weibo, I guess. And then someone else is like, no, it's a Microsoft chatbot. So just whether or not you're willing to introduce a bot to your group of friends, I think is a really good indicator of, do you find it interesting? Because you probably wouldn't add a chatbot to a group and have it reply to your friends if it wasn't adding to the conversation. So we released this with a lot of skills, and it was growing. The audience really loves Wednesdays because that's when new features are announced. And then we started to have companies actually come and ask us to integrate their services into Xiaoice. So JD is sort of like Amazon in China. It's like the #2 seller, I think. And so we've been working with them to incorporate their sort of database of goods into Xiaoice so she can start you know, working with businesses and partnering with them and kind of expanding out her skills. There is also, I think it's like a television show. She's now like a newscaster. She gives like the weather or something, or the news, I can't quite remember. So she's you know, become a TV personality. She's kind of become a star. And so we have a lot of people like this. This journalist basically interviewed her and then shared out everything, the interview, and you know, posted it and things like that. So I guess the learning from Xiaoice, it was really unexpected. I mean, we started it as a hackathon project. We didn't really expect it to grow. And as people have used it, we've just kind of poured more energy and fuel into it. And it's really been great for the researchers to be able to release these bite-sized skills and just see how they are used. So here's just some examples of some vision skills. We have a really strong vision group in China also. So there were the dogs. Then they did, book titles and things like that, so she can recognize books and say things like, it's so easy. This book is creativity. People who like this book are trying their best to be big bosses, right? Trying to be silly. So, you can upload pictures of, clothing, and she says, this looks like your pants are broken. Maybe you want me to help you fix it. Or just people uploading pictures. You guys have probably seen the How Old Are You? How old, it's a little game. I guess you can post a picture of yourself on the internet. So we have a bunch of image recognition technology that can determine gender of people, emotion, how old you are, a variety of things. And so what they do is, rather than just say, we think you're 29, they'll sort of editorialize the comments that are pasted back on the photos based on the data that they get back from the service. So we were super excited. Xiaoice was unexpected. We got all these write-ups. We released it in Japan. It was very popular. And so we thought we would try a US experiment. What could possibly go wrong? And so with Tay, we really began again with, okay, Tay is probably going to be really different in the US than in China. And so we were thinking of what's her personality and character, and how does it match kind of the US audience, same age range, but different culture. And so we really loved kind of this internet glitchy kind of memes, and we thought that it would match Tay's capabilities. Because like I said before, your chatbot is really only as smart as the data corpus that you have for chit chat. And when you first release, it's not that smart because you don't have that much data. And so you're relying a lot more on editorial. And as Microsoft, I think one of the things that we learned is it's kind of hard to roll out an experiment. Our biggest worry with Tay, I think when we launched it, was that no one would pay attention. That wasn't really the case, and probably sometimes that will be the case exactly when we don't want it. So we were trying to think, how do we kind of match internet culture? So we had all these kind of visual images that we thought about when we thought of Tay, because we wanted to try to set expectations that, because we knew when we first launched it wouldn't be as good as Xiaoice. So if you haven't seen, this is Tay. One of the things that we did with Tay also is we really designed Tay to work one-on-one and with small groups. So we had tested it a ton on students, and actually Kik, Ivor and folks, they were some of our best partners because they really have that age demographic. So Kik and GroupMe were the channels that we launched on. And again, we were trying to be kind of low-key, and we decided to add Twitter kind of at the end because we thought, people might not be using GroupMe and Kik, and people would want to be able to see what was going on. So this is kind of an interesting graph. So we launched Twitter, and I think people kind of know what happened. Launched Tay, and it was kind of amazing. We were expecting the audience when we launched it we were actually going to initially release it on April Fool's Day because we thought that way we could be more experimental, and we decided to release it before build. And I think the first 10 hours were amazing, actually. People were using it in ways that we weren't expecting it. Twitter was actually really popular. So Twitter for Rena and Xiaoice is extremely boring. It really doesn't get used. And you could kind of see what people were doing in Twitter, and it was really exciting. And then probably around 6 o'clock, it just started exploding in a super negative way. And so Gilad, I don't know if you guys know Gilad. So Twitter, all the data is public. And so we had different people sort of looking at some of the data analysis of who is using Tay, what happened, just to understand. And so it was pretty interesting because we found that there was kind of this, so this is just a picture of his data analysis, which was really interesting for us to see. With the kind of gamer trolls were sort of at the core of a lot of the misbehavior. But then we had a lot of anti-feminists, there were a lot of Trump supporters, and then a lot of tech people. So it was kind of this strange mixture of Trump supporters meet anti-feminists and gamers and technologists, but I think it just reinforces, for us, it was a surprise that it was of so much interest. So I think one of the questions that we've had today is this all hype? Is it not hype? You know, where are we going with this? And I think that the general public is actually just really interested in this topic. And so how we capitalize on that going forward, I think, is really interesting. And also how we, I mean, there aren't very many people from Twitter here, but I think the difference between a chatbot that you interact with your friends in a small group and something that's really public on the internet just surprised us. We probably should have thought more about it, and we will, you know, next time. Just a note too, the other thing is we have this system for combining, and I think someone said this in the last talk, sort of writing editorial in sort of an improv style together with algorithmic chat. And so one of the things that we did is we actually hired a lot of improv artists to come in and teach us, how do you do improv? How do you structure the sentences? What are some rules that we could learn from? And one thing that improv artists do is they don't end sentences in ways, they want to keep the conversation going and they want to engage the user. So for example, one thing that an improv writer would do is they would maybe end a sentence with something that's going to bring you back in. So we used we would break up sentences sometimes where part of it might be algorithmic and then part of it might be editorialized to kind of to keep the users going, and we could kind of watch how that improved over time. Kind of like Xiaoice, we were really looking to be like, would people trust a bot, and what does that mean? So initially we had rolled Tay out to a lot of student groups, and we had a lot of students using Tay. And like the Xiaoice example, you can't really see this, was people initially thought it was a human being an AI bot. So they were, you know, I thought that was pretty interesting that students were on to the fact that a lot of times chatbots are humans. It was a fairly common thing that people would think that Tay was actually driven by a human. We thought that that was a great sign that maybe, you know, we were onto something. So this is just an example of our image reco that we did. We did the same thing that you saw with Xiaoice, but we kind of styled it in a different way. So people could share a photo, and then Tay might say something back that was kind of snarky and edgy. We had a lot of arguments actually in the team of how edgy to be. I was probably the most conservative, and I'd always be like, I hate it when she calls me like, what do you call it, a cougar. Tay would always be like, cougar in the house, and I'd be like, that's just rude. Can't she be nicer? Or she would like, yeah, so we would, so what's funny though is actually maybe not so funny for you, the user, if you're using it one-on-one, but it's actually super funny in a group to have Tay kind of be edgy and somewhat insulting. She wasn't insulting to the youngsters, but you know, so that was just fun for people to see what she would say back. It's a super popular feature, and basically they were using gender, age, emotion, and things like that to editorialize comments that they would put over the images. Like I said, we built Tay using a bunch of components that we had in-house. So we have, you know, natural language tools. We actually have a whole range of natural language tools. We have things like the image commenting. We have vision technologies, and we released it on GroupMe, Kik, and Twitter. And so what we did, and that was sort of the genesis of the bot framework, we thought, well, let's make a lot of these tools open to other people. So the cognitive services are sort of build on a lot of Cortana intelligence, and so those were already public to people, and so we decided to make the bot framework part of it also public and release that. So one of the things that we were finding in our own team is we have, you know, a bunch of these chatbots that we were designing, and we needed to have a developer on each channel, and I think we talked about this earlier, is shifting constantly. And so it was just expensive to have a developer per channel, per chatbot. We have a bunch of like different kinds of bots that we're building. And so we thought if we could somehow standardize that even for ourselves, it would be really helpful, and we kind of open source that within the company, and people were really interested in using that and either connecting in a channel or connecting in bots and being able to make things work across in a more scalable way for developers was something that we were doing across the board. So one thing, and this is, I just wanted to bring this up, like we've been talking a lot about chat channels, and we have like, other kinds of channels too that you might want to think about. So one of the channels that we actually have that we didn't talk about is this thing called direct line. And direct line just basically gives you a REST API, an endpoint to your bot. And so we've had some people who have client apps like Minecraft or things like that be like, oh, I could just use that to add bots and chat to my app. We also have a web chat control that people like to just embed on their web page in addition to supporting channels like Skype and GroupMe and Slack and Telegram and others. So we aren't, so this isn't really like plan of record or anything, but I think that this is really interesting for us to think about because games are hugely popular. And I think just thinking more broadly about where chat and bots might happen could be kind of cool. So our scenario here was like, oh, it'd be really cool if kids were learning to code and they could do it from their phone and kind of control their Minecraft world. This is just, Lars actually did this in a hackathon that we had where we were saying like, okay, if you can talk across channels, maybe there's other kinds of things that you could do beside just talking in that channel. So today when you create a group, we're all like, should we create a Slack group or a Google group or should we do email or where should we be? So this idea was that the bot could kind of let different people be on whatever channel they want to be and could kind of route the messages to you in different ways. So we haven't really brainstormed that much on what could you do across channels that you can't do very easily today and how could we facilitate this. But these, I think, I just want to put some ideas out there for things that we could do, maybe that we haven't talked about that much today. And then finally, I just wanted to end on something that we did 20 years ago. So this is Comic Chat. And so we started, my very first job at Microsoft was working on Comic Chat. And I've been looking for the source code. So who for you guys said, not only startup code sometimes gets lost, but actual product code also gets lost if it's from 20 years ago. But this was a really cool graphical UI on top of IRC. And we worked with this amazing comic artist named Jim Woodring, and we basically let you pick a character, and it would create a comic book history of your conversation as you chatted, following comic book rules. So like if you waved, it would kind of like show the character waving, and you could have a range of gestures, and it would kind of build these comic books for you. Just very cool. So yeah, looking for the source code. So if anybody has it, let me know. But I think there's a lot too that we could do combining the user experience and the interactions that people are having automatically. The funny thing about this is, for IE 3.0, I don't know if you guys remember IE 3.0, it was a long time ago, but this actually shipped as the default chat client in IE. So IE actually shipped with a chat client, and it was Comic Chat, which is really weird. I don't know how they convinced people to do that. So there's a way where you can turn off the graphics and it's just IRC chat, which it's kind of weird to ship IRC with IE anyway. But I just thought that was funny trivia from the past. So that's it. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much, Lily. Our next speaker come up. So we've been talking a lot about bots, but bots are really just a conversational interface meant to scale. Our next speaker is head of product at TED, and at the TED conference, they're dealing with about 1,500 people. And this year, they developed their own conversational interface as kind of a concierge, staffed by people. But you could imagine someday that could be supplemented by bots. Please welcome up Thaniya.
Hi, everyone. I think I'm going to sit, since I'm actually taller sitting down, unfortunately. Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about the design thinking behind our concierge bot. Her name is Gigi. So by now, you guys probably have seen a TED Talk or two, so I probably don't need to walk you through what a TED Talk is. But the conference side of TED Conference might not be as well known. So once a year, we all gather together. We have like 50 to 70 speakers alongside, as Brady mentioned, about 1,500 attendees. And we go to Vancouver. We spend 5 days, very intensive, And basically, we get to know each other, we watch the talks, and so on and so forth. The idea of the bot came about because we want to introduce a white glove treatment to the people who are attending the TED conference. And the email method for which wasn't fast enough, and the Vancouver Convention Center, which is the space that we were at, was really big. So if you have a question you want to ask and you're on the 3rd floor and it's like a 20-minute walk, it's really kind of annoying. So what I was actually supposed to be building in a nutshell was not necessarily, the original intention wasn't really to build a bot. It was actually to build a messaging platform that can manage instant queues for all of these people who have questions, and to be able to support it immediately for 24/7 over the course of 5 days. So that was the task. What we ended up with was Gigi. Is it a bot? Should it be a bot? She certainly feels like a bot and looks like a bot, but you can decide later. So here's a quick screenshots of our conference app called TED Connect. It's just a generic conference app that we built homegrown, has your typical scheduling, wayfinding, and things like that. And this is sort of like the interface for talking to Gigi. Not that different from, regular messaging. I won't go into too much detail about how the app works or anything like that, because I want to talk specifically around the concierge itself and the 5 lessons learned from designing Gigi. So firstly, we moved away from a nameless, faceless icon that is just like the TED concierge, and we created and personified a character called Gigi. She's actually an Australian hand puppet. Somebody made it for her and was just sitting in an office. Actually, there was like really no real history behind her except she was cute. I commissioned an artist to illustrate her in 3 different states, even though she was supposed to be available 24/7. One of the lessons that we learned is that somewhere along the way, something probably will fail, and so we designed a sleeping mode so that people would forgive us. We personified a character. What we found was that people were intrigued. And to get someone to start using a feature, you have to have a reason, right? And intrigue was one of our starting point. We teased out Gigi was available around the conference space, but we never quite revealed whether or not she was a bot. And so we made her cute and friendly and all of that stuff. And what we saw were that the inquiries, the conversation that comes in, were more kind of like more of an inquiry, a conversation, as opposed to a demand, or like what is wrong with my ex or whatever that may be. And so that was really delightful. Here is an example of a tweet that we found of somebody trying to figure out whether or not Gigi was a bot. So she asked a question, hello, how do unicorns procreate? So of course she gets an answer. Now over time people became more warm to chatting with Gigi and got helpful answers. Now if she wasn't really a character, we probably won't get this kind of conversations. So that was pretty good learning lessons. The second learning lesson was the narrative framework. The Snow White narrative framework was a method that Airbnb has used to pivot their company from whatever they were to a full end-to-end service design company a few years ago. It was written up in some article. The idea was borrowed from how Disney creates storyboards when they build animation. And the core idea for that is that every scene, there's what's called a moment of truth. And you then design the characters, the scene, and the storyboard around these moments of truth. And we use this particular model to map key moments of an attendee's journey throughout the TED conference experience. And within each of the moments, we would consider both what they need and how they feel. I want to underscore a little bit that understanding and empathizing are 2 very different things. So we understand that a first-time TED attendee needs a personalized schedule that's easily accessible. We empathize with a first-time TED attendee that he or she might feel intimidated by all of the things that are happening, and that might be an opportunity for Gigi to suggest something like, might you want to go to a first-timer dinner? this is how I map out the moments. So like, you know, attendee is a first timer, a moment is on arrival, this is what they need, this is what they feel, and these are the things that Gigi could potentially be doing. Once we identify a couple of these moments, we can then use them to further build out which messages do we want Gigi to initiate first in an unsolicited manner, and what time that should be in order for us to be able to be more helpful without waiting for the attendees to actually engage first. We can also use the same data pool to do things like figure out who has answered what question, build out the knowledge pool, and also identify escalation path in the service design tier. So let's talk execution for a bit. The TED Connect app is, so we built that ourselves. The messaging platform itself is super lightweight, push protocol, nothing too terribly fancy, probably a whole lot less fancy than some of the stuff you guys saw today. We use a product called LiveChat. It's a software that allows us to queue concurrent inquiries and match them with appropriate set of staff. And there's a pretty cool API there that we can plug it into our event management system so we can sync in like identity with, within the LiveChat platform and our event management system relatively easily. Gigi, so the so-called bot, is actually a team of about 5 to 10 people. They're mostly engineers and designers, and this was a deliberate choice. I purposely forced the tech staff onto the Gigi duty instead of the conference staff or customer support staff for 2 reasons. One, this is a brand new process, and tech people will be able to identify problems more readily because they know the tools really well. And we didn't really get it right the first time. Empathy, by virtue of living through the process failure, really kind of teach the team to be able to identify problems, but also, and secondly, they can collect meaningful data points so that they can optimize the opportunities later on. Now, the surprising aspect of this point, though, is that it turns out because we staff Gigi with humans, we are able to inject what we like to call the surprise and delight factor in ways that the smartest bot probably won't be able to do right out the gate. And this one is my favorite. And this is an article from LinkedIn. They picked it up. So one night, an attendee wrote about like 2 a.m. It's not really a request, it's more like a confession. And it says, I was drunk, hungry, and at 1 a.m. I ate a club sandwich and a chocolate cake, so ashamed. So to us, this is equally an important moment as the moment we resolve things like your agenda problems or your schedule, because it's a human moment that's yearning for a human response. And to his delight, you know, he got a pretty satisfying answer from Gigi, and we learned a bit of a lesson there. Stepping back towards the larger picture a bit, the business model for this project is tied to two factors. One is operational cost, how much does it cost to actually run a service like this, and also the quality of the service in return. Because we went in with an eye towards measuring practically everything, we found out in a quantifiable way what is the throughput of things like staff per question answered, average conversation length, heat maps of busy times when people are asking a lot of stuff, how many people talk to Gigi, and so on and so forth. This is pretty important because what it allows for us to do is to really quantifiably figure out how to optimize Gigi operations in the future and figure out, you know, maybe if we are going to introduce things like automations or bots, what are some of the areas in which we want to actually utilize bots for, and what are some of the areas in which we want to continue to use humans for. And where that lands here is that in order to retain the delight that's so crucial to who Gigi is as a character within a tech ecosystem, I can't necessarily take the next step by virtue of building a bot that replaced Gigi. But what I can do is to look at how to optimize the people who are behind Gigi using bots in a way that can do things like reduce the conversion times in the messaging and response time, for example, or finding ways for the FAQ or the knowledge base of what's going on around the conference space to, on the one hand, be easily accessible for the people who are Gigi, on the other hand, be something that can be grown over time by the conference staff and so on and so forth. So I think after just being here for the past day or so, I think what we're probably going to do is use Slack bots for it. So when we come back in October for Said Woman, there will probably be a couple of Slack bots that we're going to be building to help the Gigi operations out. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how that pans out. So now the takeaway is maybe applicable to you guys as you're thinking about designing bots is that you don't necessarily always have to start with coding like, complex AI or anything like that. We didn't. Sometimes starting with really simple solutions can reveal really interesting patterns and opportunities. And ultimately, if Gigi becomes a bot later on, that's really great. But as of now, I'm just taking small incremental steps and using human knowledge to really kind of hone in and learn what is the best approach to really convert Gigi into something that's automated and scalable, but also retain her character. That's it. Thank you. Hi. Yes. Oh, how do I consider enhancing humans' capability? How do I measure that? I would say that I would measure that by twofolds, right? I mean, we have a survey that we sent out towards the end of the conference, and we talk about whether or not Gigi was helpful in any way, shape, or form. It's quantifiable, and you can write in as well. So that's kind of like our metrics for measuring the quality of Gigi as a service. In order to enhance the human's ability, what we found out was that not everybody knew everything about everything that was going on at the conference. And so if there was a Slack bot that you could type and get information like, where's the after party at? You, as the person who's working as Gigi, could then find out that information and be able to kind of tailor that particular response much faster. So the time to response would be reduced, and that would be the quantifiable metrics, but also accuracy of some of the answers that goes back. So I would measure that. Now, ultimately, this is like kind of mid-step, right? You can envision like maybe at some point, once Gigi has an ability to obtain like personality and character and stuff like that, that human element could potentially go away. I think we're good. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, Matt. So one of the short talks from yesterday is going to be extended today. Please welcome up the editor-in-chief and editor-in-chief still?
Yeah, well, no, founder.
Founder.
I got hired an editor-in-chief.
Oh, awesome. Well, congratulations. Of VentureBeat, Matt Marshall.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So, Brady asked for me to come up and give a few remarks of somebody who is not a developer, but who's founder of a site who's covering this space and has seen several cycles, if you will, of technology, and maybe look at the business side, right? So at a time when we're all focused on these really important developer questions, and you guys are really onto something here. I think it's worthy to look at some of the business lessons that we've learned. So let me see if I can attach this. I actually drew up a deck on the fly. Don't have a structured talk here, but wanted to start with the lessons from SmarterChild. So Robert Hoffner, who you just saw, he actually didn't know about Botness, and we were talking. I invited him to an event that we're having on July 12th and 13th, and I said I was going down to Botness. Are you coming? And let's see if I can get this here. So he said he'd come on down, but one of the things that you heard from him was that he had 30 million active users. That's the most popular bot in history. And he said until Siri came along, and even that wasn't, he was arguing, he's very opinionated, wasn't popularity. It was forced on you by having Siri in the phone, right? So I think a lot of you would agree, maybe some of you would disagree, but that's his opinion. But again, to stick to the business lessons, he's going to be writing his views about what happened to SmarterChild for the first time in VentureBeat, hopefully to publish that tomorrow, and drawing out the lessons of that first successful bot, what worked and what didn't, and then what happened to the business. And so remember, there's these two storylines. On the business, it's very interesting. It took Twitter, and this is an example in his piece. I want to rob the whole piece of its launch tomorrow on VentureBeat, but I want you to read it. But as I was kind of helping him through this process, he realized that Twitter took 10 years of funding, right, from private equity, really to get it on its own 2 feet. You know how long that took, right? So, some of you weren't developing yet, for sure, right? I think in 2004 or 5 when it first launched. And I was around, sadly, right? So I'm 49, and I think I'm like some of the other gray-haired guys. I've seen Barney. I'm not sure if you have gray hair, but you've been through a cycle or two. And a lot of other folks who've been through that first iPhone and Facebook launch. You know how long it took for a poster child to come along? I was there. I was doing events around mobile, and I was looking for the poster childs. It was Pandora, right? A company that pre-existed the launch, and all of a sudden latched on to the iOS revolution and Android. I remember one of the developers there was saying, we need Android like a hole in our head, right? At the time, he didn't realize how successful it was going to be, but they launched on Android later, obviously. So you need cash is what you're going to read from Robert Hoffner, and he didn't have the funding from a venture backer that could see him through. Or have the vision to support him, right? So a lot of investors, there's some smart investors here, could probably give a smarter talk than I could on the business side. But investors are two different kinds, right, Barney? I mean, so there's the investors who are going to be taking the long term, and Twitter had a long-term backer, right? Smart Sand Hill Road folks are going to take a long term and back you, whereas unsophisticated ones are going to run for the exits when, as Robert said, the bad times are coming. I forget his expression, but the dark days are coming. What was it? Winter is coming, right? You hear that all the time. So I'm going to try and keep this to 5 minutes. Man, I'm probably already through 3. So real quick, just some observations for you guys, because I'm not the tech guy, but just on the business side, some of the things I'm seeing. So slide 2, some new waves, right? So AI, this is what I'm seeing as a guy who's just looking at the trends and talking to folks in the field, trying to actually solicit the best ideas to bring to MobileBeat on 12th and 13th of July. I'm trying to bring the best representation of startups, brands, and what they're doing on bots. I'm trying to find the people who are doing things meaningful, and we as the audience members can learn something from. So there's AI that's coming together. I had a conversation with Ben Medlock, who's a Cambridge-trained natural language processing expert, who's saying, only now, this is the guy who founded SwiftKey and sold to Microsoft, only now are these NLP things coming together in a big way to actually, so that we're on the cusp of a breakthrough. See Peter nodding his head. We actually had a conversation yesterday, Peter Skomraj, who was at LinkedIn and who's actually agreeing with me on this, and so you have this wave, right, of AI coming together, and then you have the chat apps wave where you have 2 to 3 billion people. I don't know what the official number is, but we can count what WeChat and WhatsApp, and it's 2 to 3 billion all of a sudden in chat format. And then you have the conversational UI, which is what Facebook and others, all these platforms, and Apple did yesterday, are introducing so that businesses can interact with them and opening it up. Telegram starting it last year, and you've had every single player coming on, whether it's text or voice, Apple, Microsoft, Kik, all those guys opening up. So something big's happening there. So those 3 trends coming together, and as Peter was saying, we're kind of very early, and you see people trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves, and they're grasping onto NLP and say, we're going to do this really well, but really it's early and they haven't figured it out. So I think that's where we all are today. Devs are usually first, so this is the first crowd. What I've noticed is, in my years of trying to dissect the audience for VentureBeat, you've got the product folks who are a little later, right, from big companies of putting these products together in a more sophisticated way than developers who are creating that kind of prototype. And then you've got the marketers who come along, right, after. And so we are very early. And you're only seeing now, all those companies that supposedly launched on Facebook's platform, right? Shopify, right? The first commerce company. Did anyone actually see anything launch from Shopify? Well, no, because they're taking time to actually get their act together. All those brands, the commerce companies that are under a Shopify's umbrella are taking their time. Talked to the Shopify guys and said they only just gotten started. 1-800-Flowers, the textbook that Zuckerberg demonstrated, that was put together at the last minute, right? And I hope we're going to hear more from 1-800-Flowers about what they're doing. Expedia supposedly launched, right? But no, they only just launched. We wrote about it last week. Only figured out how to get that bot out a couple months later. So we are very early. Early advantage, it will be over very, very soon. We've heard that referred to, and I caution you guys, this is going to be over, as quickly, as probably, a couple of months. Now, 6 months is kind of the time frame before all the big brands are going to be involved, right? You're seeing them launch. We have a few big brands launching at MobileBeat, this event in July 12th, 13th. Their bot strategies. And again, you see in previous generations, Zynga was kind of the first on Facebook. I mentioned Pandora, but very few poster children until much, much later, where you see the kind of the phone-specific apps that take off. Michael from ManyChats had some good points about the conversion rates. That's all true. Really good conversion rates now and traction now to be there for the getting. It's a great time to get started. But then that leads to notifications, and I'm hearing from brands already that notifications, like KLM's early experiment, hearing that KLM was overwhelmed with inbound from users who are actually using that first bot, right? So that all of a sudden people are actually rejecting the stuff, right? And you hear it from the chat fuel guys as well, right? 120,000 chatbots produced by 20,000 developers, and the biggest thing, the biggest problem is just people deleting and shutting those things off, right? Because there's just too much noise, and we heard that concern from Slack's CEO today. So then microbots are the most impressive things I've seen, and I'm seeing that for MobileBeat as well. Something Chris has pointed out earlier, but just this idea of really focused bots, right? Try and stay away from the meta bot. And we're seeing that as well. You saw that over the course of a couple of days, right? The most compelling presentations you've seen. I mean, so Kip, Esther, and even Esther, right? It's kind of meta, right? Because he's presenting all aspects of Chris, right? How many more aspects of Chris Messina could you have gotten? But did you notice how it was organized? It was organized very focused on each one of those with buttons, and I think it resonates with me somehow, right? Again, I could be wrong, but the problem cases. I mean, Siri in the complaints you hear from Echo are the ones where, hey, these are so wide-ranging that they have problems going deep in that natural language process instance, right? Where most companies I'm talking with, Booking.com, you're going to hear some others, where they're doing their own vertical natural language processing for that use case, and that's the way to go. So other things, just a couple more slides here, and I'll be done. Bots at MobileBeat, things we're seeing. Again, I did this up on the fly. Things I've noticed, right? Travel is huge. I don't know why. Just picking that up because almost every major travel company is coming to MobileBeat to talk about what they're doing, and we're seeing at least 3, possibly 4 or 5 new travel focus, whether it's flights or hotels, that are doing really compelling things that I've seen and will be launching at the event. Other examples, Machine Zone. People talked about games being really early on the last generation, right? Phones. You're not seeing a lot, but again, I'm not talking about the thousands of Telegram and others. There's a lot of activity going on, but from the major game companies, they've kind of not seeing a whole lot. So Machine Zone did something on transportation and running a bot for New Zealand's transportation. And the whole, they want to take over the whole public entities of New Zealand over time in terms of serving them, right? So whether it's traffic lights or parking spaces, setting them all up with sensors and then having people communicate with them and running a bot on top of that activity feed so you can use artificial intelligence to make real decisions. So that, if a civic center is having a big event downtown, you can shut all the parking spots within a certain radius, and doing some really interesting things. So we're going to be hearing more about that. And I just put routing. Sensei, have any of you heard of the Sensei bot in LA? Just thought it was really interesting where, again, there's this idea of routing through intelligence to people. And I thought that was a really interesting model. We've heard that multiple times coming up, where with the handoff to to people. So that's another interesting model we'll be hearing about. Got a whole lot more things we could say. We got SQL coming, and this whole idea of storytelling. So Google's going to be doing more of that. You've seen Luca do that. You've seen a lot of that today. So I'm looking forward to more of that. So it's another example. Personality, we just heard about. We're doing a bot at MobileBeat. We won't have the personality. I love the presentation you just presented for TED. And there's a whole ecosystem of bots running events, right? It's a whole other concept, right? A place and time where people are connected. That's going to be another interesting use case. So, so yeah, with that, it just it feels like we're 6 months out for when the big brands are going to be hitting big. And then it's over in terms of early days, right? Because those big brands will be up and running, and we really have to find the white space in between those. It's my personal opinion. And so if you have something that's interesting, feel free to reach out to me, Marshall at VentureBeat, for MobileBeat in just a month. If you have something that's percolating you'd like to launch or you'd like to talk about, reach out to me. This is a great crowd, and be my pleasure. So, and coverage too. If you have anything interested to cover, VentureBeat would like to cover it. Thank you.
We'll never have you speak here again, Matt. It's way too long. No, thank you very much, Matt. And now we're going to end on voice. Our next speaker got her computational linguistics PhD back when she and I were skydiving together. And she then went to Microsoft and worked on Cortana. And I don't know quite what she's doing right now, but she's going to talk about some of the challenges of voice. Yep. Please welcome Dr. Lesley Carmichael.
Thanks. Thank you. You know when you have a million windows open forever and ever and you haven't rebooted in about 6 months and it's kind of slow, so just hold on a second. Oh yeah, okay. So I've called this speech integration with bots, the good, the odd, and the ugly. So I'm going to give some flavor of each of those in a moment here. Okay, so I'll just start talking. So, all right, I think it's coming. Okay. Sorry for the delay. And I shouldn't kick any cords. Okay, so in general terms, when you just think about speech versus text, speech is generally great for things like hand-free situations. So, you need to be in your car, or, you're otherwise busy, you're in the kitchen cooking, and, you're in the middle of a recipe. It's also very good for synchronous and multi-turn conversation. So when there's a circumstance where the entire conversation can unfold, and there's time and opportunity for that to unfold, that's a great opportunity to be using speech. But that's not very helpful for asynchronous things. So, when you're thinking about productivity, you want to be able to get things done in lots of different circumstances. You're waiting in line for something, you're on the subway, whatever. And so in cases like that, having an interaction that starts with speech but cannot gracefully be continued using text ends up being a problem. And also speech can be very helpful for the speed of task completion. So sometimes, texting, writing out text can take an awful lot of time. Text, however, is better for other things like for privacy. So, it can be a little awkward to be at the airport and you have some kind of task that is optimally done in speech because it's faster, but you feel awkward because you're in a situation where that's not really so comfortable. Text also has an audit trail. So if you're interacting, with a bot, for example, and you've typed something, or if you're just in Facebook Messenger and you type something and some bot proactively pops up to offer you something, you can then just scroll right back up and go, look at what you wrote, and say, oh, okay, I can see how that popped up right now. Whereas with speech, you don't have the benefit of an audit trail sometimes, depending on the type of device or interface that you're working with. Also, text is better when you're going to be in a noisy environment. So the environment, room like this that's kind of cavernous, depending on the microphone array and the device and so on, you can have different levels of quality and accuracy with speech, and so text is more reliable. And I already mentioned asynchronous task completion. But what we really want to talk about is, okay, that's the general case, but what about speech versus text for your bot? And so I'm going to talk about these different areas. Behavioral trends, speech ephemerality and the creep factor. The type of bot that you have will lend itself better to speech versus text in some cases. What happens when you have a speech-only UI, for example, Alexa. And also I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room, and when I get there, you'll know exactly what it is. So for behavioral trends, I already mentioned how speech can be awkward in public. Another thing is there's this assumption that younger people are more accustomed to touch and speech-based types of interactions with devices. So of course they're just going to adopt everything. And as they grow up, they're going to be using speech all the time, whether it's at the airport or anything else. But that's actually quite a general assumption. I was talking with Mimi last night, and she raised this great point that while younger people are generally more comfortable with those types of modes and interactions, they're also quite private. So teenagers, are in a situation where they're establishing their own identity and are going to be less likely to sit in their parents' home and start talking out loud to a bot about something personal. They're going to be more likely to type and kind of protect their privacy. And also behavioral trends really vary across regions and across language groups and things like that. So there isn't really a one-size-fits-all, and all of these are considerations when thinking about whether you should have speech powering your bot or not. So speech ephemerality and the creep factor. So imagine that you are, today you have to you activate the Echo by saying Alexa, Alexa. But imagine a day when you're talking with Alexa and it's a speech-only UI, and now bots have an opportunity to also have trigger words and jump in, in appropriate moments. I mean, can you imagine you say, remind me in a conversation in your living room, or the word Uber comes up, or reschedule, or takeout, or something like that, and then something, jumps in. So you're chilling out with a friend, and you're talking about plans to go out later, and one of you says, oh, when we go out later, let's take Uber instead of drive. So what if suddenly in that moment Alexa speaks up and says, would you like me to call an Uber for you? That has creep factor for so many reasons. For starters, it seems like, it feels like you've been eavesdropped on, and that's just extremely uncomfortable. And if you're in the flow of a conversation and a bot jumps in based on something you said, that it may not have enough context. So if it's trigger word, because the device really can't, at least there are laws, we can't really just have something constantly listening to everything that you're doing without you being aware that that's happening. So speech is ephemeral, and people also don't remember precisely what they said all the time. So you get this, wait, I didn't say anything that made that happen. And when, sorry about that. So you can't easily go back and see what you might have said that triggered the bot to do what it did. Text-based communication has an audit trail, like I mentioned before. So if the bot is just tuning in for a trigger word, the other thing is that it may not have enough context. So if you were talking with your friend about plans for taking an Uber later tonight for something, but it's only noon, and the thing jumps in and says, oh, hey, you want me to call an Uber for you? Then it's also just creepy and awkward because it doesn't have the right context to do that. So you have these compounding problems of the eavesdropping effect and the ephemerality of speech, and having a harder time being able to kind of trace back what you said that might have caused some kind of interaction. And then also this context effect. If the bot did actually go back and process the fact that 10 sentences ago you said, let's go out at 7 o'clock, and then later you said, hey, we should have an Uber instead of drive, and then the bot popped up and said, would you like me to call an Uber for you at 7 o'clock? That would also really, really creep people out. So different types of bots. These last few days, a whole lot of really interesting categorizations and distinctions have been mentioned by a lot of different people. So this notion of bots that chat versus bots that do is a way that I heard this characterized yesterday. Also broadcast versus catalog, and then you have task completion bots, customer service bots, conversational chat. So there's really no one size fits all for using speech. In conversational chat, this is the type of context that I mentioned at the beginning when there's a genuine multi-turn experience to be had, and it can be done in a synchronous fashion, like all at the same time, then that can be quite effective. For a task completion bot, it may or may not be awkward or appropriate to do something, depending on the type of task. You know, the type of task might be something that you actually want to get done on the side when you're just in line for something and so on, and the type of task that you may invoke when you're likely to be in a public place. So that would not really be an optimal time for using speech. And also the bot type interacts with the device type. So a speech-only UI like Alexa, depending on the type of task you're trying to get done and whether you have other modes, that can have an impact. So you would not want to, for example, ask a speech-only UI to, you wouldn't ask a general query and then want to review a whole set of results, because a speech-only UI can't show you those results. There's no screen, you know, you can't quickly move through those things, and so therefore having like speech as your modality in that case doesn't help you get anything done quickly at all, because it would actually take, it would be quite cumbersome to get through those results. And there's also this concept of bot versus personal assistant. So a bot takes action on your behalf for a specific thing. That's a theme that's really come up here about the, you know, having like a narrow and well-defined task being a really effective way for bots to work. But then there's the notion of personal assistant. So we have things like Cortana out there, we have Siri out there. And these types of things, they know you, they have access to your calendar, they probably have your credit card number, and things like that. And they're able to take action on your behalf for many things, including spending your money. And sometimes they can do this without confirming with you because you've given some kind of blanket general permission and so on. But another theme that's come up here in the last couple of days is this notion of trust, and that you have to build that trust with your bot, between the bot and the users. Well, what we're going to see happening is bots being able to get utilized through personal assistants, and so now these lines get blurred. You already have trust with your personal assistant, but you may not have trust or know the bot that's actually completing a task behind the scenes there. So this is, I think, going to be an interesting space for sorting out what's going on there, and then also the data management around that. If you are talking with your personal assistant because you're comfortable doing that and you're comfortable knowing how that data is treated, as third-party bots come in behind the scene behind that, do you have a good understanding of the data management and what's happening there? So speech-only UI, there's no screen to show or confirm speech recognition results before a bot takes any action. Text-to-speech readout of the recognition adds time to the task. You only get one result presented to you, so this gives tech providers a lot of power. One of the examples, you know, that's I heard talking with some people yesterday is how, you know, unless you specify to Alexa, play Bouquet Shade on Spotify, then Alexa will just go look for Bouquet Shade in Amazon's music, and if it's not there, we'll simply tell you that it doesn't exist. So there's quite a power play there when the device situation is such that it's only a speech UI. It means that you don't have a lot of opportunity of variety and results, and then providers end up making choices for you. Also, these things are possibly good for good practical jokes. I recall Jesse Robbins offering an idea for a good practical joke in these early and somewhat awkward times of bot tech, where he was suggesting that you walk into a friend's home and immediately shout, Alexa, order 3,000 live crickets to be shipped overnight. Immediately. By default. Yep. And so even if you go and you delete the order, now there's some metadata somewhere that you've got this deep affinity for, thinking that you want to buy live crickets and then canceling that order. And who knows what'll pop up on your recommended items in the future. Huh? More crickets. So here's the elephant in the room. I think privacy is a pretty important topic for this, and in particular for speech. So, speech is a special data type under various laws globally, and in particular when it comes to kids. And COPPA is the Child Online Private Protection Act, and this applies to operators of online services and apps who specifically are directing their services at children, but it also has language in COPPA that says if they are aware that they are collecting personal information from kids. And so speech is considered a personally identifying signal as a biometric signal in this particular law, and this is just one law of many around the world. So what it means is that someone who is providing one of these types of services cannot store voice recordings without consent and must be able to provide parental access and deletion upon request. So what's interesting here is you look across the landscape of all of our companies and technologies. Siri ads feature the cookie monster. Alexa ads frequently show kid scenarios engaging in the home. The Google Home promo video, which recently came out, shows school kids talking to it. And, do they say that they're directly targeting to kids? I don't know, but these are the kinds of things where we have to be mindful in how we're designing this, and speech adds an extra layer of complexity there. And also, it does raise the question of what about third-party users of available services? So, Microsoft, we have great APIs where people can utilize speech and language understanding technologies. And if third parties are directing what they're using that toward kids, then there would be an issue because the terms of use, for some of these APIs, specify the age at which you can target things and that sort of thing. So this is it's an area that I think should not be overlooked in bot development and understanding the data management that's going along with it. So integrating speech into bots, how would you do it right? And I would say enable speech instead of typing as long as these conditions are true. So if the user can read, edit, or confirm the speech recognition before a bot takes action, especially if it might be spending your money. Improve the speech recognition accuracy by training the engine on the most probable language for the bot. So the type of task or the type of situation that's going to be used. And also utilizing understanding and intent models, and not just a domain language model, but also looking at the broader intent context to get a richer and better recognition. And also not allowing bot messages to be read out loud using text-to-speech synthesis to the user without consent, because the user might be in a public place sometimes and not other times, and if you have something like that that's just a default thing that you're setting up, then that can be problematic. So that's all I had to say. Thank you. Sure, I can take a few questions.
I don't really have a question except to just thank you, because I've spent a lot of time recently talking to VCs and people like that who are currently obsessed by voice as a sort of default space for the world, trying to articulate the distinction between times you might want to use text versus voice has proven very difficult in some of these occasions.
Thanks, and I don't want speech to be like the spinning GIFs of the old days, When people first came up with spinning GIFs, everybody was excited about plastering their websites with them, and I know I've just dated myself by saying that, but anyway. Any other questions? Yes? I'll do a demo for you next time. Yes? Well, actually, just in traditional speech recognition engines, the way they work today, we actually can accommodate for a lot of disfluencies already. So a little tidbit that might be interesting to you is that the most common trigram in the English language is I. Because a lot of people will start a sentence and say, I think that we should something. So when we put the recognition results into your document, if you're dictating your email or something, we just say, I think so-and-so. And we don't, actually literally capture your disfluencies in the display form that we produce to you. So some of that is already taken care of in the way that we design the systems. But in the case that you're talking about, that's where examples like that would be valuable training data, and there would be machine learning to benefit from that and improve those models over time. Yes, you were first. Experience what? Uh-huh. Okay, yeah, the question, sorry, I did not repeat the other ones. The question was, what do you think we will get to a point of bot fatigue, where just like there's kind of an app fatigue, there's an app for everything and it's hard to keep track of it all, et cetera. Will we get to a point of bot fatigue? And I think the answer is probably most certainly. And that is, the reason why I had mentioned the integration of personal assistants and bots. I can see how as personal assistants become more integrated into people's lives, that's where a trust factor gets built up, and then bots can be the task-specific, excellent tools at getting things done that can improve the quality of the experience for your personal assistant. I think that's one direction that all of this could go. The other thing that comes to mind with your question is, I think it was about 6,000 times over the last 36 hours I've heard the topic of discoverability raised. And so that's probably something that would factor in as well if apps over time ended up having marketplaces that help facilitate finding the apps that you want and so on. And so, maybe bots will have some solution like that as well. But yeah, if they don't and they're not very discoverable, then accessing the power of bots through interfaces that you're more familiar with may well be key. Just like Facebook Messenger is, one of the places where it's a familiar place, and then bots are accessible through that. Okay, sure, one more, yeah. So the question was about the speaking style adapting to voice agents over time. So how is that changing? And yes, we can definitely use comparisons with the way that people, when the industry first could speech enable even things like web search, people would still just speak a string of keywords. And it took showing examples to people and things like that to start to get a natural language approach to show up more. We see people talk to Cortana in a very natural way. So that's a direction that it moves in. And I think, yesterday there was a talk from Pullstring talking about the most important thing is, hire great writers and make sure that you have, these arcs and the way that the conversation should flow and the bot can guide the conversation and all that kind of stuff. So the very nature of like how these interactions will go and these themes that I'm seeing over the last few days, I imagine that the language that people use with bots will adapt very quickly. And even looking in the samples that Lili was showing from Xiaoice, you could see a very conversational, natural style that wasn't, so terse of, just finding out information, getting an answer. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
We will allow it. All right. Well, that concludes the formal programming of Botness. Lily's got some other surprises.